Hey guys, welcome back. So in this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the son of Fem Kyubi in DxD? This is movie 1 and if you want more then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's get in the video. Naruto groaned as he dragged his feet through the gates of Kuo Academy, one of the most prestigious educational facilities in Japan. The academy was massive, looming over the beautiful, freshly mowed lawn. Teenagers of all ages filtered through the gates, chattering with each other animatedly. He groaned mentally, slapping his hands over his ears to block out of some of the noise. Why was he even here to begin with? Among children, he was a Kyubi, a yokai whose power was unparalleled except for a few beings. He was capable of reducing countries, even continents to rubble, reduced to slaving away in a classroom, at the behest of his old friend, Sear's Lucifer. Damn that bastard. How did he even remember that he owed him a favor? He had been enjoying his vacation, uninterrupted by any disturbances, when Sear's had popped out of a portal, begging him to help him out. Naruto had declined at first, but then Sear's just had to pull out a long-forgotten favor that Naruto owed him. He had once vowed never to go back on his word. He was regretting it now. Stupid loud children. Damn Sear's. When this was over he would prank that bastard to heaven and back. As he walked up towards the school doors, he could already hear whispers about his appearance. He scowled. Being a fox yokai, his hearing was especially sharp. And he could just about hear every word, positive and negative, that was being said about him. He supposed he stood out quite a bit, his spiky blonde hair and bright blue eyes making him look foreign. He swiveled his head from side to side, taking in the environment of the school. It seemed that females were the majority of the population from what he could see, not surprising as Sear's has informed him beforehand that the school had recently gone co-ed. Girls giggled as he walked up to the school doors, some even unashamedly snapping pictures of him. Ignoring his internal irritation, he placed a warm smile on his face and waved at a gaggle of girls standing near the doors. They immediately blushed and waved back, their cheeks tinted red. He chuckled lightly. This experience was going to be interesting. He had been in self-isolation for quite a long time now, and he was out of touch with the human world. He was brought out of his thoughts when someone grabbed his shoulder roughly. Hey, Blondie, stop taking all the girls. We need a chance too, why no? The male, judging from the pitch of his voice, shouted angrily. He raised an eyebrow, then turned around to face the boy, or rather, the three boys. The leader, a boy of average height with short brown spiky hair, stabbed his finger into Naruto's chest and glared at him. Hey, are you even listening? Naruto stared at the boy, his eyebrows still raised. They stood there in silence for a while, neither of them speaking. One of the boy's companions, a bald kid wearing a similar expression on his face, decided to speak up. Hey, Naruto cut him off. Yes, I am listening. What did you guys need? He answered lazily, running a hand through his spiky blonde hair. The third boy, the guy wearing thick glasses, spoke this time. You should get out of here. We don't need another blonde prince to steal the girls away. Naruto scratched his head. Another blonde prince? He absent-mindedly wondered who that could be. Sounded interesting. Yeah. The first boy exclaimed vehemently, pumping his fist into the air. Opie forever. He screamed. Naruto resisted the urge to facepalm. This boy probably had brass balls to shout that out in the middle of the formerly all-female school. Sure enough, all the girls in their vicinity directed their attention towards the group of boys. Two of them, wielding Bakken, strode over to the now cowering boy. Care to repeat that again, Issei? A girl with long brown hair asked sweetly, tapping her Bakken against her hand. Issei gulped and shook his head violently. His friends stood stock still behind him, not willing to speak up for the fear of getting beat by the girls. Good. Run along now. She smiled sweetly at him, shooing him off with her hand. As the perverted boy ran off, she dropped her fake smile, and a more realistic smile formed on her face. Hello, I am Murayama, and this my friend Katase. She pointed at the pink-haired girl who was standing next to her. Katase smiled cheerfully and waved at him. He studied her pink hair closely. Her hair wasn't as vibrant as Sakura's hair, but it was pretty close. Hello, it's nice to meet you both. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, Murayama snickered. Really? Fish cake? Did your parents really like ramen or something? Murayama teased, unable to resist the chance to sneak a jab in at Naruto. Naruto grumbled. Sometimes he hated his name. People always thought that he was named after a ramen topping, which, knowing his mother, wouldn't be all that surprising. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. It's supposed to mean maelstrom, he exclaimed indignantly, making the two girls laugh. Murayama slapped him on the back. It's okay, Naruto-san, we're just joking. Oh, and on another note, stay away from those three perverts, all disgusting filth, Katase remarked. glaring hatefully in the direction where Issei and his buddies had run off to, always peeping on girls and talking about Oppai. Naruto's sweat dropped at the pure venom in the girl's voice. Ero Sennin would be proud that his legacy is being continued to this day. Anyway, Naruto-san, we've got Kendo Club in a bit, so we'll leave you to own devices now. Best of luck on your first day here. Kataise and Murayama ran off after waving their goodbyes. Naruto looked up at the school again, it seemed so much larger than before. He sighed, best get it over with, as he placed a hand on the door. Something red caught his eye, his head swiveled to look at a nearby window. A girl with bright red crimson hair was leaning out of the window, staring directly at him. Her blood-red hair cascaded down her shoulders and swayed in the slight breeze that blew by. Ah, so this is Rias Gremory. I'd recognize that bright red hair anywhere. That distinct feeling of the power of destruction can't be mistaken. Naruto snapped their locked gazes and proceeded into the building. Rias Gremory, the heiress of the Gremory clan, and sister to Amao, couldn't control her curiosity. A few weeks prior, Sona had told her that there was a transfer student coming in. She had ignored her friend, saying that one new student was of no concern to her. However, he had caught her interest now, from what she could sense from the boy. He contained massive amounts of energy that he wasn't even trying to suppress. Either the boy, Naruto Uzumaki as Sona had told her, was ignorant of his own power, or he was simply confident enough to display it for everyone to see. Whether he did it out of necessity or vain, she didn't know. She knew one thing for certain though. If she was able to recruit Naruto into her peerage, her freedom from Riser would be assured. Good morning, class. A thin, weedy man exclaimed, adjusting his wireframe glasses that sat on the bridge of his nose. Today, we'll be having a new student join us. Welcome to Class 3B, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto, hearing his name, stepped through the door of the classroom, and was immediately greeted with collective squeals as the females of the class took in his appearance. The males were less enthusiastic, clapping half-heartedly and shooting subtle glares at Naruto when the teacher looked away. Naruto-san, would you please introduce yourself to the class? Tell us your likes, dislikes, your dreams for the future, that type of thing, the thin man said. After calming down the chattering class, Naruto froze. Those words reminding him of a distant memory. It was only for a moment, and no one noticed it before he stepped up and grinned playfully at the class. Hello everyone. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I like pranks, my loved ones, cute girls, and of course, ramen. I dislike liars, and people who try to harm my loved ones. My dreams for the future. Well, I don't really have one right now. I hope you all take good care of me. He grinned roguishly. Thank you for that brief introduction, Naruto-san. Does anyone have any questions for him? The teacher questioned. The once silent class burst into noise once more, this time directed at the blonde standing at the front of the class. Are you single? A girl near the back of the class shouted. Will you got out with me? Another girl shouted out. Naruto did his best to answer the questions that were thrown at him. Yes, I am currently single, and no, sorry, I am not currently looking for a relationship. The girl that had asked that question slumped into her seat. As the influx of questions slowly got more daring and daring, the teacher stepped up, putting a stop to the flood of curious students. All right, class, settle down now, Naruto-san. You can sit next to. The man scanned the class, searching for an empty seat. Naruto saw a girl raise her hand near the sides of the class. She possessed long black hair that seemed to cascade down her back in a ponytail, tied up only by an orange ribbon. Violet eyes seemed to pierce through him as they met eyes. He slowly let a challenging grin slip onto his face. Unnoticeable by anyone other than the girl, she reciprocated, tilting her head. Her violet eyes seemed to glint playfully at him. There's an empty seat by Akeno-san over there, Naruto. Naruto walked down the aisle until he reached the empty desk to the right of Akino's desk. He could already hear the jealous muttering of males and females alike. The teacher pulled out a book and started reading from it monotonously. Naruto toned out the mon's lecture, focusing instead on the girl next to him. Hello, Akeno-san. How are you? He started, attempting to make small talk with the beautiful girl. Era. So forward, isn't it polite to address someone that you don't know by their last name, Uzumaki-san? She leaned forward, leaning her head on her hand. Naruto smirked. He already liked this girl. She possessed a certain quality that he could relate to. You know, I don't know your last name, Akeno-san, he teased, stressing her name. Her eyes widened, then she giggled. Foo. How ignorant of me. Please forgive me. My name is Hamejima Akeno. Pleased to meet you, Naruto-san. See. Now that's just unfair. Naruto deadpanned at the girl, who laughed innocently at him. I've got to call you by your last name. But you get to call me by my first name? Now, I never said that you couldn't call me by my first name, but merely that it wasn't polite to call strangers by their first name, she replied, smirking. Naruto was brought to a stop for a moment. He was not expecting that answer from this girl. Quickly gaining back his composure, he retorted swiftly. Oh? Am I not a stranger to you, Hamejima-san? After all, we just met, Naruto shot back. Grinning as he did so, Akeno blinked. She had been caught off guard. Something didn't happen too often. That's true, however. There's no reason that we can't be friends, is there, Uzumaki-san? Or am I not good enough for you? She covered the last sentence up with a fake pouty expression that would have fooled any mortal male. Naruto was not a mortal man at all. Underneath Akeno's playful facade, there was hurt. Lots of it, that she covered up in shame, like a painter hiding a ruined piece of art. Fear that he wouldn't accept her. Fear that he would ignore her as most people did. Her looks did nothing else besides placing her on another pedestal in the eyes of others. Of course we can be friends, Hamejima-san, he reassured. As soon as those words escaped his mouth, he could see the visible change in Akeno's emotions. That subtle, yet constricting fear slowly ebbed and faded away. While the hurt receded slightly, there was still a lot of it, something that he would have to look into in the future. Very well then, take good care of me, Naruto-kun, she finished, her lips curling up into a smile. A genuine smile this time, a wholesome, heartfelt smile. He couldn't help but follow her example. As infectious as her happiness was, he was over a few centuries old, and yet, he could still be affected by pure, untainted emotion, the beauty of life, he supposed. Likewise, Akeno-chan, let's get back to the lesson, shall we? We wouldn't want to get in trouble now, do we? With a nod, the two went back to the lesson. On that day, a beautiful friendship was born. Naruto-kun, wake up. A soft yet firm voice penetrated through the hazy mist that made up Naruto's dreams. A soft hand touched his back, and he sat up slowly, blinking to clear his vision. The class was empty. The lights turned off. He took note of his position, arms crossed to create a makeshift pillow for his head. Gah. What happened? I only remember the teacher talking about calculus and everything went dark after that, Naruto groaned, yawning. Akeno smirked. You fell asleep in class, idiot. The teacher let you off as a one-time thing, and he told me to give you my notes for this class, but if you fall asleep again, he said he'd give you detention, she said, standing up from her seat and brushing her skirt off. Naruto stared for a moment. The skirt that the girls wore as part of their uniform were really short, on the edge of being indecent. What kind of people designed these clothes? At least he could sympathize with Issei a bit now. Akeno noticed him looking, and gave Naruto a teasing look. See something you like? She inquired, quirking an eyebrow. Of course, Naruto whispered, standing up and leaning his head forward so that his mouth was next to Akeno's ear. He let his warm breath sweep across her skin, and she shivered. He straightened up, a satisfied expression on his face as he saw Akeno's flushed face. Anyway, why'd you stay behind, Akeno? You could have easily woken me up as you left the class, Naruto asked the girl, who had since recovered from her flushed state. My club president told me to come and fetch you so that she could speak to you. She's interested in you. She's gotten you a pass for any other classes you have. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. Oh? As grateful as I am to her for ridding me of these classes for today, tell her that I am not looking for a relationship as of yet. Akeno gave him a stern look. You know what I meant, Naruto. Naruto raised his hands in surrender. Fine, you got me. He relented, letting Akeno lead him out the door. By the way, who's your president? Rias Gremory. Why do you ask? She asked. So it was Sierzek's little sister. Good for him then, he would be meeting her earlier than expected. Oh, no reason. Is it weird of me to ask who I am going to be meeting? Naruto shrugged it off. Also, what about those notes that the teacher asked you to lend me? You don't want your new friend getting into trouble, do you? Akeno laughed, opening the door of the classroom. Your mistake there was assuming that I actually took notes on the class. Calculus is just as boring for me as it is to you. Without another word, she headed out of the classroom. Naruto stared after her for a few moments, before throwing his head back and laughing. Man, he liked this girl. Shaking his head, he followed Akeno out of the empty classroom. The duo eventually arrived at the old schoolhouse that was located around the back of the school. Akeno stopped at the wooden doors of the building, and opened it, letting Naruto enter first before entering herself. Naruto found himself intrigued by the feeling of the building. The walls were covered in occult symbols, and candles provided an ominous setting. He turned to Akeno. Hey, I forgot to ask. What kind of club does your president run? This seems like a unique place to hold club meetings. Bucko runs the Occult Research Club, a club that, well, Does research on the occult, pretty straightforward. We have very few members, compared to the rest of the clubs, rest assured, we're all very nice people. Akeno approached a winding staircase. At the top of the staircase, there lay double wooden doors. Akeno placed a dainty hand on the doors, and pushed them open, allowing them access into the room. The entire room had a very light feel to it. It was very well lit and furnished, a sitting area with couches and pillows, desks, and what seemed to be a shower. With someone in it. A pale outline of a girl with crimson hair could be seen in the shower. Faint broken singing could be barely heard over the sound of the running shower. Oh my. Bucko seems to be in the shower. Sometimes I wonder if she's an exhibitionist. Take a seat, Naruto. I'll be right back with her clothes and some tea. Naruto walked over to the sitting area and took a seat on one of the red couches. He let out a groan as the soft material sank under his weight. After a while of listening to Searzek's little sister attempts to sing, Akeno returned, carrying a tray of tea and a stack of clothes along with a neatly folded towel for Rias. Naruto was relieved. Listening to Rias' admittedly pathetic attempts to sing made him want to go deaf. The shower turned off, and the door opened, letting steam into the room. Akeno left the clothes on the table, handed the towel to the wet girl, and went over to the windows to let the steam out of the room. Naruto roamed his eyes over the red-headed girl. To many, she would be the definition of a goddess in human flesh. Long crimson hair fell down her back, contrasted by creamy smooth skin. Naruto's eyes widened when they reached her chest, by the log. What in the world had this girl been fed to achieve that size of breasts? There was no way that those were real. Rias raised an eyebrow at Naruto, who was staring at her breasts with no ounce of shame. There's no way that those are real, Naruto breathed, eyes wide. Rias felt a twinge of annoyance run down her spine. Her breasts were 100% real. She covered her chest, flushing red. Hey! My breasts are real! Rias exclaimed hotly, embarrassed at Naruto's declaration. Nah. There is no way those are natural. What kind of implants did you use to grow those watermelons? I get that some women feel insecure about their chest, but you took it too far, he declared, pointing a finger at her bare chest. I didn't use any implants. Nor do I feel insecure about my chest. Akeno stood off to the side, her body shaking as she tried to hold in her laughter. Well, how about being an exhibitionist? Does Searzek know that you like to take showers in the presence of strangers? Immediately, the room fell quiet. Rias looked like a deer caught in headlights. And no. I am not an exhibitionist. I just like taking showers, that's all. She stuttered, face flushing bright red. Naruto wagged his finger at her. You know, I can't take you seriously when you're standing there naked and trying to argue that you're not an exhibitionist. Rias fell silent. Without another word, she picked up her clothes and started putting them on. Akeno coming over to help her. The girl was still red-faced from trying to hold in her laughter. Once Rias was properly clothed, they took a seat on the couches. Akeno handed Naruto a warm cup of tea, which he smiled and nodded his thanks to her. She flashed her own smile back and poured Rias a cup of the beverage. Naruto took a sip from his cup, and his eyes widened, pleasantly surprised by the taste of the tea. It tasted almost as good as what Amaterasu made for him whenever he visited her in Takamagahara. He set down his cup and flashed a thumbs up at Akeno. This tea is excellent. He complimented. Why, thank you for the compliment, Naruto-kun. Rias still looked disgruntled about Naruto's previous statement about the authenticity of her chest. Naruto, seeing this, leaned over and poked her on the nose, eliciting a squeak of indignance from her. Are you mad about what I said about your chest? It was just a joke, calm down. Naruto patted her head, flattening the red ahoge that stuck out from her hair. Rias reached up with her hand and slapped the offending limb away with a force that didn't fit her figure. She looked up with a serious look in her eyes. How do you know my brother's name? She asked suspiciously. Naruto froze. He hadn't meant to spit out Searzek's name. It was a spur of the moment when he had been teasing Rias. He mentally facepalmed. Well, hee, you see, Naruto mumbled, searching for an excuse that he could tell the girl. Damn it. Searzek didn't want Rias to know that he had asked someone to look out for her. Searzek-sama sent him here to look after you. A monotone voice sounded out behind them, making Naruto jump. He turned around to find a beautiful silver-haired woman dressed in a French-maid outfit. This was Searzek's wife, Graphia Lucifuge, also known as the strongest queen due to her overwhelming control over ice. The only people he knew that could utilize ice better than her were Seraphol Leviathan, another Mao, and maybe Skadi from the Norse pantheon. What do you mean by that? Rias asked, disbelief underlying her tone. Onisama wouldn't do something like that. He was worried about you. Rias-sama, It is only natural for an older sibling to care for their younger ones. He couldn't come himself for obvious reasons, so he asked someone else to come and take care of you, Grafia explained, her voice carrying a sense of importance. I don't need someone to take care of me. I have Akano and the others. They are more than enough to protect me, she protested, her cup of tea laying forgotten on a side table. Strange occurrences have been happening around Kuo lately, Rias. I am sure you know about them already. Disappearances, kidnappings, the such. Tainted light energy has also been found at the sites of the crimes. Forgive your brother for being concerned, Grafia retorted, her voice growing slightly in volume. Bu Rias tried to protest one more time, but to no avail. Naruto will be protecting you. That is final. I, as well as your brother, have enough trust in his power and his character to let him do this, Grafia finished coldly, her tone allowing for no further argument. Rias slumped down into her seat in resignation. Fine, but can I ask, what supernatural creature are you? You're definitely not a devil, else we would have sensed you right away, Rias inquired. I am the man that has no enemies in the north, west, east, nor south. I am known by many titles. The prankster king, the ramen addict, the playful trickster are all part of my collection of names. Naruto Uzumaki, at your service, he finished, standing up and bowing deep at the waist. Everyone in the room's sweat dropped at the blonde. Rias could only stare at the man in complete disbelief. This was the man that her brother had asked to help protect her. Grafia reached his ear and tugged on it sharply. Ow. Ow. Let go of me, Grafia-chan. Naruto struggled to free himself from the woman's iron grasp as best as he could. This is not the time to make jokes, Naruto-sama, the silver-haired woman scolded, letting go of his ear. Fine, fine, I am a Kyubi Yukai. Geez, did you really have to pull that hard? Naruto muttered, rubbing his ear gingerly. I am starting to feel bad for Sirzex if he has to deal with that every day. Grafia's eye twitched in annoyance. She raised her hand threateningly and Naruto cowered away in pretend fear. Okay. I'll stop. Don't hurt me anymore. Naruto cowered away from the angry woman. Grafia closed her eyes and rubbed her temples with her hands. Please refrain from speaking of my relationship with Sirzex-sama in such a manner in the future. She sighed in a resigned manner as if this was a common occurrence. I need to be going now, Rias-sama. Please treat your guest with respect. Even if he is a clown and a practical jokester, he is also a very good friend to your brother and should be treated as such. Rias nodded reluctantly. It was clear that she still didn't think that he was needed to help protect her, that her peerage was enough to keep her safe. But this was the mentality of a sheltered child. She only had the barest idea of the other beings that existed in this world. Beings that could crush her brother to nothing using naught but a thought. Grafia waved her hand in the air, channeling her magical energy. A teleportation circle bearing the sigil of the Gremory clan formed underneath her feet, glowing red as it did so. I'll be on my way then. No doubt Sirzex is doing something stupid right now while I am gone. That idiot, she smiled fondly, a rare expression for the usually reserved woman. Take care, Rias-sama, Naruto-sama. See ya, Grafia-chan. Naruto enthusiastically waved at the woman from his spot on the couch. In a bright red flash, the woman was gone. He turned to Rias and Akano, the former having a disgruntled expression on her face. The latter was seemingly taking it easier, her usual playful aura replaced with a contemplative one. Ah, it won't be so bad, Rias-chan, Naruto grinned at her. Once you get to know me, I am sure we'll have a lot of fun together, Rias groaned. That's what I am afraid of, Naruto chuckled. So, when do I get to meet the rest of your cute peerage? From what I've already seen, I am sure the rest of them will impress me as well. Rias seemed to puff up a bit from the compliment, some of her former confidence returning. They'll be returning from their last class. She glanced at the nearby clock that hung from the wall opposite her. Right about now, as if the red-headed girl was able to tell the future. A knock sounded on the wooden doors that led into the clubroom. Naruto propped his chin on his hands, curious as to who it would be. Come in. Rias called out. Akano pushed herself off the couches and went to fetch more tea for the newcomer. The door creaked open and in walked a petite white-haired girl. This was Kaneko Taju, the school's unofficial mascot, and to the perverts, the resident loli. To Naruto, she was as cute things could get. Golden eyes widened in shock as the larger boy slammed into her and wrapped her up in a tight hug. Rias nearly burst out laughing when she saw the older boy cuddle Kaneko as if she was a real kitten. Naruto could feel the cute white-haired girl struggle against his firm grip, using all of her strength to try to break free. This one must be the Rook of Rias' peerage. If what Ajuka had told him about the evil pieces was true, the Rook was the most physically capable of them all. Besides the queen, pawns were run-of-the-mill cannon fodder. knights were the speedsters, and the bishops were the long-range caster types. At least, that was the stereotype. There were stronger devils that owned peerage members that could fit in multiple categories. He placed a hand on the still struggling girl's scalp, rubbing it gently while channeling nature chakra through it. Eventually, the girl calmed down, her movements coming to a near-complete stop. Naruto nearly tripped as he brought the girl back to the couch. She had started purring like a cat. He had never seen anything as cute as this before. Akeno came back into the room and almost dropped the tray of newly brewed tea. She rubbed her eyes to make sure that what she was seeing was real, even pinching herself a few times to ensure that it wasn't a dream. Rias wasn't much better off, staring at the pair with wide eyes, mouth hanging open in disbelief. The usually detached Kaneko was showing affection to someone. Naruto snickered and the two snapped to reality. My, Kaneko seems to be very bold, don't you think, bucko? Akeno asked. Kaneko had long since curled up in Naruto's lap, eyes closed and purring as Naruto's gentle fingers stroked her white hair. It seemed that Nekosho carried the same likes as their animal counterpart. Naruto looked up at Akeno and saw her still staring at Kaneko, a hint of jealousy present in her eyes. You know, you can just ask if you want to get petted as well, Akeno, he called out to the girl, who flushed red. I'll be sure to remember that. Naruto-kun, she trailed off. Rias groaned. Couldn't they be any less obvious about their mutual interest in each other? Luckily, she was saved by another knock on the door. Kaneko cracked open her eyes as well, sitting upright in Naruto's lap. Naruto, seeing this as a signal to stop petting her, removed his hand from the top of her head. It turned out to be a mistake, as Kaneko grabbed his hand and placed it on top of her head once more, giving her a questioning look. He was met with a bland stare. Pet me more, came the monotonous demand. Naruto smirked and continued rubbing her scalp, earning him another purr. When the door opened this time, a blonde-haired boy walked in. Once he saw Naruto sitting on the couch with Kaneko purring under his touch, his face gained a confused look and he glanced toward Rias for instruction. Akeno looked over to Naruto. Are you going to pet him too? She teased, her lips curling up into a smile. Naruto wrinkled his face. No thanks, I am not into guys, he replied, smirking. Naruto, this is my knight, Kiba. The boy waved at him and bowed slightly at the waist, walking over to an empty seat on the couches and taking his own seat, accepting a cup of from Akeno. Naruto nodded at him in greeting. Kaneko over there is my rook. Akeno over here is my queen. I presume you know what all these pieces mean? She asked. Naruto nodded his confirmation. How about that other energy signature that I feel? Somewhere in this clubhouse, there's another devil, feels somewhat like a vampire too, Naruto inquired. Rias froze up. It was clear that she hadn't expected him to be able to sense types of energy, judging from the stunned look on her face. The look only lasted for a couple of moments before her face recomposed itself back into its usual mask. Rias glanced sideways where Akeno sat, her face unreadable as if asking her a mentally conveyed question. Akeno nodded at her. That is my bishop. His power is too unstable to control, so we have to keep him under seals to prevent any accidents from happening. His name is Gaspar Vladi. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Interesting. A vampire turned devil. Any other peerage members I need to know about? Naruto asked. Rias shook her head. Well then, I think that's enough for today. I'll be going now. He made to move Kaneko off his lap, the girl reluctantly jumping off his lap. Tomorrow, more petting, she demanded in her usual monotone. Naruto slowly nodded. Rias was a little jealous, truth be told. Why did her cute servant like a person that she had just met over her? It was unfair. A little rain cloud formed over her head. As Naruto made his way to the door, Rias called out to him, making him stop in his tracks. Wait. I wanted to ask you something. He turned around and raised an eyebrow, waiting for her question. Would you be willing to join my peerage? I am sure you'd make a great addition to our family, Rias asked. She wasn't sure that she would be able to reincarnate the blonde Yukai as a devil, with the large amounts of power surging through his body, but she sure as hell would try. She was desperate after all, with the upcoming events. Naruto laughed and shook his head. There's no chance that you'll be able to that, Red. After all, if your brother wasn't able to reincarnate me, what hope would you have? Anyway, I am getting tired. Have a good night, everyone. He gave everyone a mysterious grin and strode out of the room, leaving everyone with new questions on their mind. Rias sat in the clubroom alone. Everyone had already returned to their homes within Kuo. She mused over what Naruto dropped on everyone in the room before he left. Apparently, her brother, the strongest Mao, and one of the top 10 strongest beings in the world couldn't reincarnate him. She wasn't sure she believed him. She knew of the power that her brother possessed, and the sheer destruction he could bring, What she sensed from Naruto was equivalent to an ultimate-class devil, maybe on par with Grafia at most, definitely not on par with any of the Mao, much less Searzex. His charisma was certainly not be underestimated though. He had already made connections with Akano and Kaneko upon his arrival. Something about him just attracted people to him. It had taken all that she had to keep her composure in his presence. When he had walked into the room, she had been hit with the sudden desire to drop the cold front and treat him like a friend. Whether it came from a passive power he held or whether it was just his natural charisma was unknown to her. She shook her head. She would have to contact her brother tomorrow to get more information on Naruto. Suddenly, the flyer that she kept in her pocket started glowing a bright red. She leapt to her feet. All thoughts about the mysterious yokai flitting out of her mind. It was time to secure her final step towards freedom. Even if it was a desperate act. After all, don't we all fight harder the more we're backed into a corner? Rias thought as she teleported away in a flash of crimson light. Naruto hummed as he strolled through a park. He inhaled. Taking in the fresh air that Kuo provided, he felt power course through his veins and heighten his senses. He took a deep breath, taking in some of the tainted nature energy that coated the planet. Grimacing when the tainted energy touched his core and clung to it like tar, he began the process of cleansing it, wiping the black stains on it off and filtering his own pure nature chakra through it to form new, untainted chakra. He released it back into the environment. Around him, trees seemed to grow greener and lusher, dead grass came back to life, and the happy sounds of the animals who inhabited the park could be heard. He had been doing this for quite a while now, ever since he discovered that he could connect with nature on an intimate level, essentially recycling the tainted energy of the planet and purifying it. He continued his walk towards his apartment, which was located not far from the park. The sunset painted a glorious image across the horizon, bloody red and orange streaked across the sky, lighting it up like a painter's canvas. As Naruto cut through some foliage blocking his path, something caught his senses, a surge of tainted light energy. What was a fallen angel doing here? A very faint scream soon followed. He broke into a run towards the source of the conflict. Not even noticing the magical barrier that blocked his path, he skidded to a stop in the middle of the park, where a large fountain was located, his blue eyes taking in the situation. A female fallen angel floated above a bloody body, wearing something that looked like it came straight out of a BDSM store. The body was unrecognizable at this distance. Even if he squinted, the fallen angel turned in his direction, a sneer forming on her face. You know, you'd be way prettier if you weren't wearing that outfit and if you didn't have that look on your face. Somebody wake up on the wrong side of the bed today. He called out. The taunt seemed to work. As the fallen angel's face contorted in rage, a spear of light formed in her hands. How dare you? You're nothing but a lowly human, nothing compared to us. You should have just walked away. I'll have to kill you now. She growled, plunging towards him, spear ready to impale him. Naruto grinned. Finally, some action after his boring day. The angel only had one pair of wings, so it wouldn't count as a real fight. But beggars can't be choosers, can they? As the fallen angel neared his body, he grasped the spear of light and threw it to the side, throwing her off balance. While the angel gasped, she didn't have time to complete her sentence. As Naruto slammed his fist into her stomach, she coughed out spittle, splattering Naruto's face with it. She went flying back into the fountain, struggling to sit up as she watched the man get closer. Now, that wasn't too nice, was it, Crow? Naruto smiled down at her, wiping the spit off his face with his sleeve. She weakly formed another weapon in her hand, trying to ward the man off, but to no avail. Naruto grabbed her from out of the fountain and slammed her into the floor, her face contorted in pain as her back made contact with the ground. Naruto drew out a kunai from his uniform and held it to her throat. So, Crow, what are you doing here? I thought that Azazel kept you all in your territory, unless you're a defector, which means that I have the right to kill you on the spot. The fallen angel's eyes widened in fear. Tell me, what is your name, and why did you kill that boy? He pressed the edge of the knife a little deeper into her throat, drawing several droplets of blood. My name is Rainier, the fallen angel choked out. Go on. Naruto urged as he readjusted his position so that he was more comfortable while he interrogated Rainier. It seemed that luck was on Rainier's side today. A burning pain ripped through Naruto's side as something impaled him through the side. His grasp on Rainier loosened up, and the fallen angel bolted into the night sky. He looked down to see a light spear being removed from his body. Should have known that these crows tend to travel in flocks, he groaned. This was going to be a pain to regenerate. He stood up slowly. Another fallen angel floated in the sky, using one arm to support Rainier, focusing a little energy to the entry point of the spear. He could feel the bleeding stop and the flesh knitting itself back together. The fallen angel that had thrown the light spear gaped at him. It was another female. She had blue hair and a maroon trench coat that was opened up at the chest area, exposing a generous amount of cleavage. A golden necklace hung from her neck. Naruto grinned smugly. You thought that was enough to put me down? Barely felt like a scratch to me, truthfully, he taunted. That was a lie. Even though he could heal from his wounds faster than a phoenix could regenerate, he still felt the pain like they did. At least, in his base form he did. A measly spear of light wouldn't even register to him if he was in one of his more powerful forms. The fallen angel grasped her spear of light tightly. Naruto could see her knuckles growing white with how hard she was clenching her weapon. She glanced over at the half-conscious Rainier and back at Naruto. She seemed to come to a resolute decision. With a flash, she disappeared into the night sky, leaving behind a few black feathers. Naruto watched her go, an unreadable expression on his whiskered face. So, that was your plan all along, wasn't it, Rias? He spoke without turning his back to the bloody body on the floor. The park was silent for a while before the aforementioned girl stepped out from behind a tree that littered the edges of the park, a guilty look on her face. He turned around to find the bloodied body of Issei. So you were the one, huh? Poor kid. I suppose you're going to reincarnate him now, Rias. Naruto looked at the girl. Rias gave a shaky but determined nod. He examined her face carefully. She possessed the look of someone who was desperate, someone that would do any to achieve what they wanted. Desperation was a strong motivator for both goals that some would label good, and that some would label bad. That look was dangerous. After all, he had been best friends with someone that had the same look throughout his life. It would be easier to let the boy die, and then erase what memories he had left behind. After all, there were multiple sacred gear users in Kuo Town. What use was this one? Suddenly, Naruto sensed a presence in the boy, faint, but present all the same, a glimmering light, reduced to a spark, but nonetheless still shining. Diedrich. So this is your new host, huh? Interesting. Perhaps I'll let him live after all. A small grin formed on his face. He looked Rias in the eyes and nodded. Go ahead. Do it quickly. Wasting no time, she knelt down and drew out her evil pieces. Use all your pawns. It's the only way you'll be able to reincarnate him. Naruto called over, tapping his foot on the ground. Rias shot him a disbelieving look. Really? He doesn't look like much, she mumbled slowly. Trust me on this one. Reincarnate him quickly. I'll heal him for you unless you want to use the other way to heal him. Rias grimaced, skin-to-skin contact with the leader of the perverted trio of Kuo. No thanks. She pulled out all her pawns and placed them all on Issei's chest. I, Rias Gremory, bid thee, Issei Hyodo, to rise. Walk the earth again as a devil, and my pawn. Relinquish the gates of heaven and hail to the gates of the underworld. The pawns glowed a faint red before sinking into his chest. Seeing that the reincarnation process was over, Naruto walked over to the motionless body and placed a hand on near the perforation on Issei's body. Channeling a bit of chakra through the limb, he was pleased to see the hole in Issei's chest slowly close. If Rias was shocked, she didn't comment. Probably had enough excitement for today. She picked Issei's body up effortlessly and teleported away in a bright red flash. Naruto chuckled lightly. He couldn't wait to see what would happen as a result of the rebirth of the Red Dragon Emperor. The fights between the white and the red were always glorious to watch. The stars seemed to shimmer brighter that night. Naruto yawned as he closed his front door, stepping out onto the front porch of his house. His hair was untidy and looked like it had just been through a tornado. He had gone to sleep late last night. Unsurprising when you considered what had happened. The blonde stretched as he took in the cool morning air. He ran a hand through his messy hair as he walked down the stairs that led up to the doors of his house. Well, it technically wasn't his house. No. There was no way he could ever afford a house like this one. Sirzex had bought it for him when he had first approached him with the offer. He appreciated the gift from his old friend. Brought back memories of when they used to spend more time with each other and the other Satans. Those memories brought a smile to his face. Seraphal and Sirzex had always been the more energetic and childish of the Mao. Ajuka was like the responsible older brother of the group, and Falbium. Well, Falbium was lazy, extremely lazy. The man could sleep through a raging war. However, despite his lazy exterior, his mind was not to be underestimated. He had come up with the many plans that had led the new Satan faction to victory during the Civil War, reminded him of a certain pineapple-haired friend he once had. As Naruto trudged down the road towards the academy, he heard something come up behind him. He slowed his pace purposely, allowing whoever it was to catch up easier. Footsteps pounding on hard cement and hard panting could be heard as the person pulled to a stop beside Naruto. Ha, ha, good morning, Naruto-senpai, Issei gasped out. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he examined the perverted boy. A light sheen of sweat coated his forehead and he looked slightly out of breath. But that was it. Nothing looked out of place. That was good. his healing had worked properly. Naruto-senpai. Are you there? Issei waved his hand in front of Naruto's eyes, trying to get his attention. Yeah. Good morning Hyodo-san. I hope you've had a good night's sleep? Naruto yawned. Yeah, I did. By the way, you can call me Issei. I don't mind it that much. Speaking about last night though, I wanted to ask you something. Issei scratched the back of his head, looked down at his feet, then back to Naruto. Naruto merely raised an eyebrow in response, prompting the boy to go on. Well, I had a date last night. Issei started. Wait, a perverted guy like you actually got a date? How desperate was that girl to go on a date with you? Naruto snorted in fake amusement. He was certain that the fallen angel that he had seen last night was Issei's date. It was how most of them operated after all, underhanded, sneaky methods that got them close to their targets. He had a vague idea about what Issei would ask him now. Hey, I resent that. Issei exclaimed, even a guy like me can get lucky every once in a while ya know? Naruto had to hold in another chuckle. It seems that Diedrich hasn't awakened yet. Otherwise he would be tearing his eyes out. Each and every one of his previous hosts were powerful warriors. Yet this one is a complete and utter pervert that would gladly die if he was given the chance to see a pair of breasts up close. You even admit your depravity, Naruto muttered under his breath. Issei gave no sign that he had heard Naruto, choosing to continue ahead with his question. When I woke up today, I immediately went to my phone to see if her number was still saved on it. When I checked, it was gone. I asked my parents to see if they perhaps had her number, however, they couldn't seem to remember that I went out on a date yesterday and laughed me off. Issei prodded a crack on the cement with his shoe. Naruto nodded along with Issei's explanation absent-mindedly. Now he was sure that the fallen angel had been masquerading as Issei's girlfriend. When Rainier had killed Issei, the other fallen angel with the blue hair must be paid a visit to his house and removed the memories they had of Issei telling them about his date. Naruto-senpai, I know that yesterday was your first day at Kuo, but do you, by any chance, know the name Amano Yuma? She attends Kuo Academy as well, but I am not sure what year she's in. About this tall, he motioned to his forehead. She has raven black hair and pinkish eyes, and the most perfect pair of pie you could ever imagine. He gained a dreamy look in his eyes. No, I can't say I've ever heard of her before. Naruto shook his head. Sir Rainier had taken on the alias of Amano Yuma. The name literally translated to Heaven's Evening Days, which referred to the setting of the sun, which was the time when she had murdered Issei. He snorted. No originality in that name. He disapproved. Issei had clearly retained his memories of what had happened last night. He was holding those memories in denial of the events that had occurred. It was to be expected. People tended to deny and fear the things that were not in their field of comprehension. As much as he wanted to drop the entire bomb on Issei's head right now, he would grant that privilege to Rias, Issei's king. He wanted to see the boy's reaction. Issei gained a dejected look. Naruto laughed and slapped the boy on the back, making him stumble a little. Are you sure that you're not just imagining one of those women in your adult mags? I am sure you have enough of those to maybe dream about a woman that you saw in one of those, Naruto teased. Issei shot him an offended look. No way. Yuma was real. She wasn't just a figment of my imagination. There's no way that she could be someone that I dreamed of. Besides, what happened couldn't be a dream. It felt too real. He trailed off, whispering the last sentence. Naruto quirked an eyebrow. Perhaps Issei wasn't as in denial as he thought. He was split in two over the incident instead. Part of him was telling the other that it was a dream, but the other half was arguing with its counterpart, telling it that it had been real. He really wasn't sure which was better right now. They had reached the school by now. Issei left with a farewell, joining his perverted friends, no doubt to question them about his girlfriend. Naruto vaguely wondered if today would be just as interesting as yesterday had been. The blonde kitsune stretched as he pushed open the doors leading into the school. Had just have to wait and see, no? Patience was key after all. Naruto knocked on the door of Issei's class, stepping back a little. He waited for someone to open it. It was nearing the end of the day. And Rias had sent him to fetch Issei for her, most likely to introduce the new world he was part of. He almost pitied the boy. Naruto was no stranger to the prejudice that came with being a reincarnated devil, especially one that was previously a human. Many of the older devils, the clan heads, favored pure blood devils. Issei would have to work hard to gain any respect from his peers. He was lucky that Rias was the one that had reincarnated him. The Gremory family was one of the few that were known to treat their servants as family. The door swung open to reveal a petite girl that he didn't know. Curious gold eyes blinked under her spectacles, and light brown hair tied into braids swayed as she propped the door open with a foot. Her eyes immediately glazed over when she saw him, and he swore that her eyes shoot down to his pants on more than one occasion. Hello there, she purred at him. Naruto smiled awkwardly down at her. Hello there. I am looking for Hyodo Issei. I need him for something. The brunette pouted slightly before turning around, yelling for Issei. In no time, Issei appeared at the front door, a perplexed look on his face. Naruto-senpai. What do you need me for? Naruto grinned and wagged his finger. Now that would be telling, wouldn't it? Issei groaned. The girl from before suddenly jumped in between them, a perverted expression on her face. Naruto was the one that groaned this time. He was getting impatient. Nay, Blondie, I am sure I am much more interesting than this pervert over here. Why don't we go somewhere private and see what happens? She said, wiggling her eyebrows. No thank you, I doubt you have anything interesting to offer, despite how interesting you say you are. That did the trick. The girl flinched back, a hurt expression on her face. Before she had the chance to say anything else, Naruto was already dragging Issei away by the arm. Hey. Let go. Issei protested, tearing his arm free from Naruto's grasp. You haven't even told me what you need me for. Rias wants to talk to you, Naruto said bluntly. Issei's eyes widened. You don't mean the president of the occult research club? One of the great ladies of Kuo? That Rias? Issei asked, disbelief clear on his face. No, the Rias that works as the school's secretary, of course that Rias. Naruto almost shouted in exasperation. Rias would have a lot of work to do if she wanted to make him stronger. You don't see any other student here named Rias, do you? Issei looked sheepish. Yeah, you're right, he mumbled, rubbing his head. He suddenly brightened up. Wait, does this mean that I get to see her magnificent oppai up close? Naruto facepalmed. Did this kid only think about breasts? Something told him that the answer to that question was yes. Reaching the old schoolhouse, Naruto entered, Issei following closely behind. He was vaguely reminded of yesterday when Akano had led him to the meeting room the same way. Walking up to the doors, he pushed them open to reveal the same setting that he had been welcomed with yesterday. Only, this time Rias wasn't in the shower and the others were already here, seated at their spots on the couches. Naruto left Issei by the door and sat beside Kaneko, who was chowing down on some chocolate. She paused for a moment to grab Naruto's hand and place it on her head once more. He shook his head in slight amusement before resigning to his duty. Akano walked in from the back room, carrying with her some tea, handing a cup over to Naruto. He nodded in thanks and flashed her a warm smile as she took her seat beside him. You can sit down too, Issei. Rias smiled. Issei shakily nodded, walking over to sit at an empty couch. Naruto took a brief sip of his tea and settled in comfortably, ready to enjoy the spectacle that would no doubt occur. Issei, I assume that my messenger told you what you were called here for. Naruto bristled slightly. He was no mere messenger. He rose up to voice his concerns when Akano pulled him down once more, putting a finger on his lips before he could say anything. He flopped back down onto the couch, nursing his wounded pride. As I was saying, did my messenger tell you why you were called here for? Rias emphasized the word this time. Naruto's eyes twitched. So this is payback for calling her breasts fake yesterday. Her eyes glinted in barely contained amusement, confirming his suspicions. Issei nodded, albeit still a little confused as to what was going on. Yeah, Naruto told me that you wanted to talk to me, but he never said what about. Issei scratched the back of his head. Rias stood up and walked over to her desk, opening a drawer and pulling out a picture. She handed it to Issei, whose eyes got wide. Why you? He stuttered in disbelief. Amano Yuma, Rias confirmed, taking a seat once more. I assume that name is familiar to you. Issei looked up from the picture of Yuma and nodded. Yeah, she was my girlfriend. How do you have this picture of her? Rias crossed her legs, resting her hands on her knee. Naruto shifted into a more comfortable position on the couch, making Kaneko glare at him disapprovingly. You better get comfortable, Issei. This is going to be a long explanation that you're going to have to sit through, he called out, making Rias glare at him for interrupting. I'll try to keep it short, Naruto. I won't be explaining everything right now. I don't think anyone will really benefit from that much knowledge in such a short time, Rias admonished. Naruto raised his hand in mock surrender, backing off. The red-haired girl turned her attention to Issei, who sat there with a confused expression on his face. Tell me, Issei, do you believe in the supernatural? If possible. Issei was even more confused by this question. Do you mean things like dragons, elves, demons, that type of thing? Issei inquired, scratching his head. I never really thought about if they really existed or not. I was more focused on different things, he finished, a perverted gleam entering his eyes. Pervert. Kaneko spoke up suddenly from her spot beside Naruto. Issei flinched back as if struck. Before he could protest his innocence, Rias spoke up. What if I told you that they in fact did exist? That most of the mythological creatures that you may or may not have read about in stories did exist? That some of them are closer to you than you think? I honestly don't know what to think of that. I don't know whether you're speaking the truth or if you're lying. But what does all this have to do with Yuma? Issei leaned forward, a hint of desperation behind his brown eyes. Naruto studied the boy. He had been starving for information throughout the entire day, searching for any clue for what had happened. Yuma Amano was part of the supernatural world. Naruto spoke up this time, catching Rias by surprise. She had spoken with him, telling him to leave the explanation to her. She opened her mouth to interject. The blonde raised his hand, stopping her attempt at interrupting him. Issei's eyes turned to him now. Naruto halted his ministrations to Kaniko's scalp to place his full attention on Issei. What did you say? Issei demanded. Naruto ignored his harsh tone. Yuma Amano was part of the supernatural world. In fact, her name wasn't even Yuma Amano. But, this information is all useless to you, is it not? Naruto locked his eyes onto Issei's. The conflicting emotions in the boy's eyes were clear for all to see, swirling around like a chaotic maelstrom. The emotions changed from anger, to denial, to confusion, and finally, acceptance. Issei nodded slowly. The boy's knuckles were white as they clenched into fists. Yes, she sprouted these dark wings and stabbed me with something. I was supposed to be dead. Why am I not dead? Issei stumbled over his own myriad of questions. You did die. It was Rias this time that spoke up. You died from your wounds last night. Issei looked shaken, as anyone would, he supposed, hearing of their own death. Is this the afterlife then? Doesn't seem like it, Issei asked shakily. Rias smirked. No, you died, but I was able to save you from dying last night, by turning you into a supernatural creature, she finished, standing up from her seat. Issei stared dumbly at her, not quite understanding. You see Issei, all of us here in the room are supernatural creatures. More specifically, most of us are devils, she declared grandly, flaring out her wings as she did so. Akeno, Kiba, and Kaniko also flared their bat wings out. Issei looked towards Naruto as if expecting him to sprout wings as well. Naruto began chuckling. Did you not listen to what she said? I am not a devil, I am a kitsune, a nine-tailed fox. Issei had the decency to look embarrassed. Suddenly, as if he came to a moment of realization, his head perked up. Does this mean? Rias nodded. Yes, you are a devil as well, reincarnated from death by yours truly to be part of my peerage and family, Rias declared, raising her hands towards the sky. Naruto snorted at her melodramatics. It was clear that she was doing it subconsciously, but it showed how much her brother had influenced her. Akeno was giggling at her king as she made a fool of herself without even realizing it. What exactly is a peerage, Gremory-san? Issei asked. Rias lowered her arms sheepishly. A peerage is a group of reincarnated devils that more or less serve the one that reincarnated them, using evil pieces, she explained, holding up a dark red bishop. This was what this meeting was about really. Will you, Issei, be willing to serve in my peerage and become a member of our family? Naruto had expected Issei to jump at the chance. He had expected Issei to be happy, content, elated even with this newfound knowledge. After all, what human would not jump at the chance for more power? He certainly didn't expect Issei to walk over to the exit and open the door to walk out. Issei? Rias called over to the boy, uncertainty clouding her voice. I am sorry, Gremory-san, but I can't accept. I can't give away my humanity to become a devil, even if it might be a shadow of its former self. I can't give that away to become a devil, Issei explained with a tinge of regret in his voice, turning to walk out the doors. Naruto could respect his opinion, having once been a human himself. He could understand what Issei was feeling right now. Immense emotions were clouding his every pore and said emotions of fear and confusion were influencing his decisions. Wait. What if I told you that you could have your very own harem if you become a devil in my peerage? Rias called out desperately after the boy. Immediately, the boy shot back into the room, eyes wide in wonder. Really? I can have my own harem if I become a devil? Well then, count me in. He cheered. Naruto facepalmed at the boy's stupidity. He had no idea what he was getting himself into, did he? Everyone around the room was visibly shocked by Issei's bold exclamation. Kaniko was staring at the boy with clear disgust in her golden orbs, while Akeno and Kiba found the situation amusing, choosing instead to chuckle lightly. Issei dropped to his knees, looking up at Rias with pleading eyes. You must tell me how to get a harem. All those creamy, perfect opaya books slammed into Issei's head, knocking him sideways. Naruto looked to his side. Kaniko, apparently having enough of Issei's antics, had been the one to throw that book at him. Kaneko plopped back onto the couch, crossed her arms whilst glaring balefully at the boy on the floor, muttering dark obscenities about perverts. Well, to be honest, getting a harem will be hard, but not impossible. There are multitudes of devils that have their own harems, Rias admitted. Issei seemed like he was hanging onto her every word as if they were a lifeline. You just need to achieve the status of high-class devil. How do I do that? Naruto snorted. He wished the boy good luck. Achieving the status of a high-class devil could take decades, centuries even if he did it the standard way. Well, there are really 3 ways to promote yourself to a higher status within devil society. The first is one that you probably won't be using, which is military accomplishments. The second is doing well and showing off your skills in raiding games, which is basically a strategic battle meant to show off the prowess of devils. The third, which is the one that you will be using, to put it bluntly, you'll be granting wishes. She pulled out a flyer from her pocket. That's the flyer that weird woman gave me, Issei exclaimed in recognition. Yup, by granting someone's wish, depending on your performance, they can form a contract with you. Forming multiple contracts will garner you points as long as they exist, and the more wealthy and connected the person is, the more points you will receive during that contract. Understand? Rias asked, looking pointedly at Issei, who nodded his head rapidly. When can I get started? He asked. Rias handed him the stack of flyers. Right now, she stated, a small smile crossing her face. Naruto chuckled as he unlocked the front door of his cozy home. When he had left the clubhouse, Issei had been arguing vehemently with Rias about the mode of transportation that he was going to use for delivering the flyers. Originally, Rias had been planning to send him to clients utilizing her teleportation circle. However, it appeared that the boy was lacking in magic, which meant that the teleportation circle wouldn't function correctly. Instead, Rias came up with a solution. Since Issei couldn't use a teleportation circle, Rias told him to use a bike instead. A bike, to ride all over Kuo, handing out flyers. He had to stifle a laugh thinking about the poor boy's plight. A pang of pain suddenly shot through his heart. Seeing how the orc acted around each other reminded him of old memories. Walking inside his bedroom, he picked up a framed picture of his old friends that he would never forget and cherish for the remainder of his life. His old sensei, Kakashi, stood in the back, eyes smiling awkwardly. A boy with hair that looked like a duck's butt stood on the left, sporting a monotone face. Sasuke, in the middle of the photo. A girl with hair the color of cherry blossoms smiled in happiness at the camera. Sakura, and, on the right of the photo, was himself. He found himself snorting in amusement as he was once more reminded of the way he was before. Everything really, before the 4th Great Ninja War happened, before the Kyubi was unleashed on the world, before everything he ever loved and knew came to an end. Anyone with a weaker mental fortitude would have probably taken their own life by now. He had been naive, ignorant of how the world worked. Honestly, that wouldn't have been a problem if he was as powerful as he was now. Perhaps no one would have died that day if he had been this powerful. Perhaps he could have saved them. He felt old emotions resurface deep within his chest, resounding deeply within his core. Tears stung his eyes and he blinked to get rid of them before they could fall. There's no point in getting emotional over the long deceased. Grief only serves to bring your spirit down. Sadness is an emotion that is better off not felt, lest it makes you crumble in battle. He droned out loud to the empty room. Somehow, the silent room felt like it was filled with noise, filled with deafening war cries, and screams of loss, screams of pain. They pierced to his very soul. But, he continued, his voice cracking slightly, his rational side was telling him to stop, to suck his sadness back up, and leave it to dry. His emotional side was telling him to let it out, to wet his cheeks with his sadness. Don't I have a right to grieve after what I've been through? No answer came from the shadows of the room. He let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. The blonde let his muscles relax, letting himself fall back onto the plush bed, covering his face with his hands, and groaned. It had been a long time since had an episode like that one. It had been centuries since the 4th Great Ninja War, and with it, the end of the era of shinobi. It seemed that the memories of his inability hadn't faded yet. Suddenly, a presence fell upon the house. It felt ominous and overbearing, like it had no end to its vast power. Naruto groaned in exasperation. It was her again. Naruto. He sat up to find a petite girl wearing gothic Lolita attire standing in front of him. She had long black hair that stretched down to her hips and emotionless gray eyes. Strips of tape covered her small chest. Naruto coughed. Ophis. What an honor. What brings you to my humble abode? He spat sarcastically. He supposed it was a bit rude, but so was barging in on someone's house at night, especially in his current state of mind. The girl tilted her head, exposing one of her pointed ears. You are mad. Why? He facepalmed. He had forgotten about naivety that Ophis possessed. She, or it, as some may have called her, maybe one of the strongest beings in the world, but she was also naive to a fault. Well, you see, breaking into someone's house at this time of the night is not exactly polite, Naruto reprimanded with a hint of force. Ah, came the response, as bland as ever. Anyway, I came here to. She was cut off by Naruto, who shook his head immediately. No, 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 I've lost count of the times you've come and asked me to join your paltry group of mischief makers. My answer the first time you asked me hasn't changed, Ophis. Ah, so you want help me reobtain my silence? She questioned, the tiniest hint of longing lingering around her otherwise monotone voice. No, however, my offer to you still stands. Stay here with me. See how you like it. Then decide if you want to return to the dimensional gap. It'll be easier for both of us. I have to keep an eye on you anyway. Well, you and the other two, Naruto offered, holding out his hand. Ophis seemed to consider it for a moment. Naruto could literally see the metaphorical gears turning in her head. No thank you, she finally got out, turning to leave. Placing one hand on the doorknob of the dim room, she paused. Naruto looked up in confusion. You can't keep playing the part of the bystander, Naruto. You will get involved eventually. After all, it's part of your nature, is it not? Ophis turned to look at Naruto, her gray eyes piercing into him. I do know. That's why I am trying to enjoy my time while it lasts. It's truly rare to get these moments of peace. Eternal peace is impossible. A fragment of delusion. The only true peace that exists are these small moments, and for someone like me, they are all I can get. Naruto stared down at his palms, rough, calloused palms from all his time fighting and killing. I still don't see why you don't just join the Chaos Brigade. You would be able to keep an eye on me and sooner or later, the other as well. I do not understand why you would need to, but your reasons are your own, I suppose, Ophis admitted. Naruto chuckled. Haven't I already told you this already? I am a coward. The old me would have helped you without a doubt. Despite those unsavory profiles you choose to surround yourself in, time changes a person. It certainly did to me, tore me apart, rendered me a shadow of my former self. He waved his hand in dismissal. Please, leave. I need to get some sleep. He lay back down on his bed and threw a blanket over himself, not even bothering to undress. Ophis looked down at Naruto with eyes tinged with the barest amounts of sympathy. To me, you are not a coward. A coward would have run away from that red-haired devil. A coward would have declined what that devil asked of you. You were happy. Away from society and the supernatural. A coward would have stayed in that isolation. To me, you were brave. Keep that in mind. Naruto. A dark purple flash and the infinite dragon god disappeared, leaving only the blonde behind in the empty room. That night, Naruto had a restless sleep, pondering what Ophis had told him. Naruto stumbled tiredly into the classroom and promptly collapsed into an empty seat. It had been a long day today, and he was barely able to keep his eyes open throughout his classes. He absent-mindedly noted through half-blurred vision that Rias and Akeno were the only people that were in the room at the moment. The two girls shared a concerned look, taking in the blonde's terrible condition. His hair was unkempt and he had dark bags under his eyes that hadn't been there before, indicating that he hadn't gotten much sleep the night before. Naruto. What happened to you? Rias greeted worriedly. She got a tired moan back in response. Perhaps he just needs some excitement, Akeno purred demurely, leaning down to look at the blonde's tired visage, hoping to provoke some reaction out of Naruto. Rias shot Akeno a half-hearted glare. Akeno. It's not the time for jokes like that, she exclaimed, her cheeks tinted red. Akeno tilted her head, placing a hand on one of her cheeks. Oh. Are you jealous perhaps? Do you want to join in? She questioned. I certainly wouldn't mind. How does that sound, Naruto? A muffled affirmative grunting came from the direction of the slumped-over blonde. Rias flushed brightly. Akeno giggled loudly. Actually, I am curious as well. What happened last night? Akeno called over to the slumped-over blonde, who raised his head to look at her, a haggard expression covering his face. One of my associates visited me late last night and I didn't get enough sleep. Nothing you have to worry about. He waved them off as nonchalantly as he could in his current state. I also wanted to ask how Issei did during his initial run. Rias chuckled lightly. He did all right, actually. Despite having to ride his bike all over town, he retained enough energy to keep pushing despite his exhaustion. Though I pity him for the clients he had to answer to. She shuddered slightly, thinking back to what her familiar had seen while watching Issei complete his requests. It must have been one of the unluckiest initial runs I've ever seen. Naruto looked up, surprised. Really? Damn. The kid's got his work cut out for him then. Imagine having to suffer through the decades, maybe even centuries of forming those contracts. Speak of the devil. Here he is, he remarked, stifling a yawn. Right then. The aforementioned boy walked into the room and plopped himself down onto the couch. "How are you today, Issei?" Akeno asked, pouring the boy a cup of tea before doing the same for herself. She offered Naruto the fresh pot of drink which he accepted gratefully, needing the caffeine. "Better than yesterday, that's for sure." He shook his head from side to side in disgust. "It took a porn marathon to get that image of that man out of my head. Like, how can you even be called a man if you're obsessed with being a magical girl? I still can't get that image out of my head." Naruto shivered in disgust as well. If there was one thing that he agreed with Issei on, that was probably it. Issei took a large gulp of his drink, wiping his mouth afterward. "On a brighter note though, I met someone today." Rias raised an eyebrow, prompting Issei to continue. "She was a nun, I think. She had this cool healing power thing. We saw this little kid that scraped his knee on the way to the creepy abandoned church on the edge of town. She went over to him, placed her hands over the scrape, they glowed green, and the scrape was gone. Pretty amazing, huh?" Issei downed the rest of his tea. Rias shot up in her seat, her eyes suddenly blazing with sudden vigor. She shot forward with surprising speed, grabbing the surprised Issei by the collar and hoisting him up to her eye level. "Listen to me, Issei. Don't ever interact with that nun ever again, or go near that church again. Do you understand?" Rias narrowed her eyes until Issei nodded vigorously. Only then did she lift him down from her iron grasp. "Sheesh. What did nuns and churches ever do to you to make you so mad about that?" he grumbled. Naruto nearly fell over laughing at the boy's stupidity. It was like he never became a devil. Rias seemed to be questioning her choice to reincarnate the pervert, rubbing the bridge of her nose with 2 fingers. Akeno hid her smile behind her hands. "Tell me, Issei. What are you now?" Rias sighed, on the edge of developing a migraine. The brown-haired boy rubbed his head in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I am a Devi." "Oh." Issei trailed off, coming to a sudden realization. "Ah. I guess I really should NT then," he admitted sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. "Thank you. It's for your own safety, please remember that." Rias sat back down slowly, the earlier worry draining out from her body, her muscles relaxing. "Also, Naruto," Rias called over to the blonde, who looked over with questioning eyes. "I forgot to tell you that Issei unlocked his sacred gear yesterday." Naruto's eyes widened and he turned in Issei's direction. "Well then, let's take a look, shall we?" He leaned forward in interest. He couldn't wait to see Diedrich again. He could sense that the heavenly dragon was still dormant within the boy, but it had been a long time since he had seen the gauntlet in person. He made a quick mental note to try to find the wielder of divine dividing whenever he had spare time. Issei's eyes flashed in excitement. The boy stood up and assumed a menacing position. Well, Naruto assumed that Issei thought it was menacing. He looked like a complete fool standing like that. Issei thrust his hands forward and shouted Kamehameha. A bright red light covered Issei's lower arm, and when it faded, Naruto found himself looking at it twice critical. To be honest, it was a bit underwhelming. He knew that Diedrich was dormant within the boy, but seriously? A twice critical? He had seen enough of those in his life to last him another few centuries. "That's nice," he commented half-heartedly, something that Issei seemed to pick up on, judging by the nasty look that he had given him. Luckily, Naruto was saved from Issei's wrath when the doors to the clubroom opened up again, and in walked Kaneko and Kiba. Kaneko, as usual, plopped right next to Naruto and took out a bag of sweets. Rias clapped her hands in excitement. "All right, now that everyone's here, I wanted to show Issei how we devils fight." Luckily, there were reports of a stray devil in the area. This is the perfect chance to show Issei how he will fit in with the peerage. Naruto shot Rias a warning look. "Of course, he won't be fighting the stray devil. This is just an excursion to show him how we fight as individuals," Rias hastily added. Issei raised his hand tentatively. Bucko. What's a stray devil?" he inquired curiously. "Well, a stray devil is typically a devil that has divested itself from its master in search of greater power, and without their master to control their powers, they usually go out of control and corrupt the devil physically and mentally. That is why they are usually put down as soon as we can find them. This one has been kidnapping and eating people, from what the reports said," Rias explained, flipping through a thin folder. Issei's eyes grew wide and he paled. Eating people?" He stuttered in fear. Rias nodded grimly at the shaking boy. "It's not pretty, and that's why we're tasked with putting it down. Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, concerned. Issei took a moment to compose himself, taking deep breaths to calm himself before nodding shakily. I am ready. Bucko, I won't let something as small as that stop me from being there," he exclaimed, a little more confident now. Naruto let a small smile grace his lips. Issei did really remind him of his younger self, headstrong and reckless, and determined as one can be. Naruto, you can either come with us or you can go off to do whatever you do during your spare time. I trust you to come to help us if we need the backup. Rias addressed Naruto this time, and he nodded lazily in acknowledgement. Alright, he stood up, finishing the rest of his tea and setting the empty cup down with a satisfied groan. The caffeine had worked wonders on him. I feel like getting some fresh air, so I'll probably go for a walk by the piers. Signal if you need me. He stretched for a moment before striding out of the room, leaving Rias and her peerage to their own devices. Naruto sighed as he walked down the concrete walkway of the local piers. The river shimmered in the bare light that the setting sun provided. He wondered if anyone was out fishing at this time. Perhaps they would be able to teach him how to do it. The setting sun provided a nice ambiance for the town. He smiled in content. It was only during times like these that he could truly relax and enjoy the beauty that the world had to provide. It was so hard to believe that a few centuries ago, this land had been nothing but annihilated war-torn landscape. Then again, he mused, a few centuries is enough for most things to heal. He sat down on a nearby bench and leaned back, resting his back on the wooden frame of his seat. The shimmering waters in the setting sun gave for an excellent view, one that he greatly appreciated. No unnecessary interruptions, no supernatural events. However, as soon as that thought process ended, Naruto felt a small tinge of tainted light energy enter his senses. It felt familiar, and more potent than the energy he had felt from the other two fallen he had seen in Kuo. He smiled. No matter how the man tried to hide his energy, he would never be able to truly hide all of it away. There was only one fallen angel that had that feeling to him, Azazel, the leader of the Grigori. Sure enough, said man strode into view and plopped down next to Naruto with a sigh, setting something down next to the bench. Naruto leaned over, curious, and was surprised to see 2 fishing poles and a case full of bait, along with a couple of bottles of sake. Azazel chuckled. I am hurt, Naruto. The first time I've seen in you, in what, a couple of decades, and you're more interested in what alcohol I bring rather than greeting me. I am tempted to not share any with you now. The black and golden-haired man pouted rather childishly. You know, what if I told Shemazai you were slacking off to come here to fish and drink? Naruto deadpanned. What do you think would be his reaction? Azazel immediately cowered back in fear. You wouldn't do that to me, would you? The man pleaded. When Naruto's facial expression didn't change, Azazel huddled himself into a little ball and started rocking back and forth. My own friend has turned on me. What has the world come to? He bemoaned, mock sobbing. Naruto facepalmed. Several decades and you haven't changed a bit, Azazel. What did you come for? He questioned. Azazel immediately straightened up, reverting back to his original position. You of all people should know that several decades is nothing for beings such as this. Azazel smirked in amusement. He reached down and grabbed 2 bottles of sake, tossing one to Naruto. Naruto examined the label, popping the cap off and taking a deep swig, Azazel doing the same. This is some strong stuff you have, Azazel, Naruto complimented, taking another swig. Azazel puffed his chest out in pride. Damn right. As for what I came for, I came to catch up with a friend and to request you something. Azazel wiped his mouth. I assume that since you came out of your isolation, and the fact that you're currently residing in this town, where Searzex and Seraphal's little sisters are learning, that one of them asked you something. Naruto grunted back in response. I also assume that you know of the fallen angels that are in this town. Azazel continued. I want to make it clear that they seem to have gone rogue and strayed from my orders to watch the Red Dragon Emperor. Instead, Rainier seems to have misinterpreted my orders and went on to kill the boy. Tell me something that I don't know, Naruto snorted, emptying his drink and reaching for another. I want you to apprehend the rogues if you can. Bring them back alive if you can, so I can administer them punishment. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He didn't answer for a few moments, considering all his options. Azazel sent him an imploring look. Naruto sighed in defeat. Damn his soft heart. It still seemed that his desire to help his friends still lingered in his core. Alright, you'll owe me a favor later then. Azazel laughed it off. I also wanted to tell you that Kokabiel has been acting weird lately. He's been disappearing a lot lately. Just watch out for him if he's involved in his situation. Azazel warned the blonde, who chuckled. PFT, that warmonger. He has nothing on me, as if he could ever hope to beat me, Naruto smirked. He may be weaker than you, and I have no doubts that you could easily beat him, but you really shouldn't be that confident. Don't underestimate the creativity of some out there. Power can always be laid low by a good plan. Azazel reprimanded Naruto, who grunted back in acknowledgement. He had seen many examples of this, Shikamaru and Hidan one of the prime examples. Anyways, onto a lighter note, let's move on to something else. Azazel leaned down and picked up the 2 fishing rods. He handed one over to Naruto. who held it gingerly as if it could break with the slightest movement. "Consider my debt repaid," the man winked. And so, a tainted angel and a broken kitsune fished until night came. "Please, Naruto-senpai, help me save Asia," Issei begged desperately. His hands clasped together, Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise. It was rare to see the perverted boy immersed in something else other than perverted commodities. This Asia person must be special to him. He had been walking home when Issei had stopped him and pulled him aside, a pleading look on his face. If not for the sheer aura of urgency that Issei possessed, he might not even listen to his pleas. It wasn't that he found Issei annoying, but his Naruto found his perverted side to be slightly frustrating. He raised his hands, palms facing outwards in a placating motion. "Whoa, calm down, who's Asia?" Naruto asked. Issei froze in his tracks. A sheepish look crossed over his face and he scratched the back of his head nervously. Naruto chuckled lightly. "How about we get some refreshments before we talk?" he offered, raising a hand to Issei, but then lowering it, where Issei's hands had been. He didn't want to know. Issei didn't seem to notice this and nodded, his eyes brightening up. "Wait. So let me get this right. The nun that Rias told you explicitly to stay away from for your own good, was taken by a fallen angel? And now you want to go save her without Rias' permission?" Naruto asked incredulously. Of course, he knew that the only fallen angels that were in the town were the ones that had gone rogue, as Azazel has told him a few nights ago. He would have to deal with them sooner or later. He was only sitting here with Issei right now because he wanted to see what the connection the boy had with the girl and if that bond was important enough that the boy would give his own life for her. It was a test of sorts. If he wasn't ready to try his hardest to try to save someone that was close to him, it was better that Rias didn't have him in her peerage. Issei opened his mouth to respond but was cut off sharply by Naruto, who held up a hand. "Why are you so determined to save this girl? Who is she to you? After all, you've only met a few days ago. There's no way that someone could have formed a bond in that short of a time, unless..." Naruto shot Issei an inquiring look. Issei nodded glumly. "Care to explain why you interacted with the nun again after Rias told you not to?" Naruto asked, turning his attention to the brewing kettle of tea that sat in front of him. He could make some pretty good tea, though nothing that came close to Akino's heavenly drink. Opening a cupboard, he retrieved 2 small cups, which he poured the warm drink into. He sipped his drink and smiled, seemingly satisfied with his creation. Turning back to Issei, he was startled to find a forlorn expression on the boy's face. Naruto raised an eyebrow but chose to say nothing, sliding the second cup over to Issei. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds emitting from the duo being the occasional noise of drinking. Issei finished his cup first, sliding away from his body, staring at the intricate patterns covering the china cup. "She looked lonely and lost," Issei mumbled, tapping the countertop in a rhythmic pattern. His eyes were slightly unfocused and cloudy. Naruto recognized that look. After all, it was the look that he used to own all the time, the look of someone lost in their memories. "I helped her around town and got to know her a bit. She's really kind, really caring as well. She was my friend." Issei's voice gradually grew louder as he continued talking, his tone filling with determination. "That's why I want to help her. I've already told Rias that I'd go rogue if she wasn't going to let me go save Asia. Will you help me?" Naruto smiled on the inside. It seems that the will of fire shows itself in many unique ways. Sarutobi Jiji. The determination to go against all odds to protect one's loved ones. This test had been short, albeit useful. A test of character. Issei had passed with flying colors. He made his choice. Issei took this continued silence as a negative and stood up, his head hanging low. "Well, thanks for the tea, I guess. I'll be going now." He turned to leave, an aura of hopelessness hanging around his body. "Hey, I didn't say that I wouldn't help you, did I?" Naruto called out, a tone of amusement coloring his voice. Issei's grip on the door slackened and he looked back at the blonde in disbelief. "What?" Issei asked in disbelief. He had been under the assumption that Rias had told Naruto not to aid him, that Naruto would refuse the moment that he asked. He had allowed his hope to fester and grow as the conversation continued. That same hope had disappeared once Naruto hadn't answered his final question. "I said, I'll help you. Are you deaf?" Naruto laughed. "What do you need me to do?" He questioned the shell-shocked boy, smirking. Issei seemed to come to his senses at last, and he smiled widely. The razor-sharp edge of a blade glinted in the moonlight. The blade emitted strange energy, one that was foreign yet similar to some of the energies that holy weapons emitted. It looked like a normal double-edged straight sword, and to any human, it would be considered as such, but to any intuitive sensor, it was a veritable well of energy. "Oh? What's this beauty?" A male voice spoke out. A pale hand reached out to grab the bandaged handle of the blade. swinging it a few times to get a feel for the weapon. This looks like it could some serious damage. The man dressed in the robes of an exorcist and the smile of a psychopath giggled manically. Bringing his unoccupied hand up, he ran the edge of his newfound weapon lightly across his palm and laughed out loud when a cut opened up at the barest touch of the blade. Ooh, I think I've found my new favorite toy. Let's have a good time together, nay? Freed giggled. Maybe I'll even get to carve up some sinners with you? Just think of all the good times. The stray exorcist walked away, swinging the blade around carelessly. Rainier had told him to be present tonight, to witness the extraction of the sacred gear from that sinful nun, associating with a filthy devil. Just thinking of that girl gave the mad exorcist a foul taste in his mouth, and he spat onto the side of the road, wiping his mouth. He brought his sword up and gave it an appraising look. Beautiful, he swooned, hugging the sharp blade to his chest as he continued his path towards the abandoned church. The looming doors to the gloomy church were blasted off their hinges, courtesy of Kaniko's rook strength. Naruto whistled in appreciation. While it wasn't that impressive considering what other members of the supernatural world could do, pointless destruction in cool entrances was an art to be admired. After all, it was something that he liked to do as well. A connoisseur of chaos, he liked it. After Issei had asked Naruto to aid him free Asia, Naruto had convinced the boy to ask his fellow peerage members for aid as well. He had been preparing to bribe Kaniko to come help with the offer of headpats, expecting Rias to have said something to them. Surprisingly, it seems that the red-headed girl had kept the argument with Issei to herself, as they agreed almost immediately. Although Kaniko had still demanded that Naruto be her personal head masseur for the next week, he was satisfied with the numbers that they possessed. Of course, he alone would be overkill to any group of lower-tiered fallen angels, even in his weakest form. That wouldn't be fun though, would it? Issei wouldn't have any chance to taste the feeling of battle, to rid himself of the wool that covered his naive eyes if he took them all down by himself. This was an opportunity that presented itself to them on a silver platter, and he'd be damned if he didn't let them take it. The group of devils walked through the settling dust of the fallen doors to find a gaggle of armed rogue priests and exorcists gathered inside, seemingly guarding a corridor at the back of the church that seemed to lead down into inky blackness. From that corridor, Naruto could sense the tainted energy of the fallen that had tried to assassinate Issei that night, along with a faint flickering of untainted light. That was the girl Issei was looking for. Issei. Naruto glanced sideways at the shaking boy. He placed a comforting hand on the boy's back. Kiba, Kaniko, and I will take care of these fellows out here. He waved his other hand at the mob in front of them. You, on the other hand, will need to make a break for that corridor that's down at the back of the church. That leads to where I think Asia is. Judging from the energy I sense down there. Issei nodded and gulped hard, steeling his resolve. Kaniko cracked her knuckles and Kiba formed a standard European longsword, holding it at the ready. An exorcist walked up in front of the waiting crowd of rogues and flipped his hood back. Naruto reeled back in disgust. This man was filth. No, something lower than filth. The iron scent of blood oozed from his every pore. This man had killed many in the name of his own pleasure, his own personal gratification, drenching his hands in the blood of innocence until his hands were permanently colored red. He needed to die, to be wiped off the face of this planet. Hello, filthy devils. The man exclaimed, a crazed smile spreading across his pale face. It's a lovely night for a bloodbath. He trailed off dreamily, eyes glazed over. You, what's your name? Naruto called out, his eyes narrowing. Behind him, Issei fidgeted nervously. The rogue exorcist's eyes narrowed in anger. You're not worthy enough to know my name, filthy devil. The exorcist exclaimed. He turned to the crowd behind him and chuckled lightly. Not that you'll live long enough to remember it anyway, he said, drawing a blade, and all hell broke loose. The mob of rogue exorcists surged forward in a singular wave. Kaniko sprung forward to meet them head-on, trying to clear a path for Issei to make his way to the corridor at the back of the church. Naruto and Kiba stood frozen in spot, both of them thinking very different thoughts, yet shocked all the same. That sword, the Kusanagi, how was it even here? He had been sure that all traces of the shinobi world has been wiped out after the disastrous events of the Fourth Ninja War. He was sure that he had sealed away Sasuke's Kusanagi away where no one would be able to find it. His eyes narrowed, unless it wasn't Sasuke's Kusanagi. Orochimaru had possessed the Kusanagi sword as well, didn't he? But then how had it found into the hands of this rogue exorcist? Before Naruto could call out a warning, Kiba suddenly dashed forward with a howl of hatred, bringing his longsword down towards the crazed man. The exorcist met Kiba's weapon head-on with the Kusanagi and cut clean through the steel of the blonde devil's weapon. Kiba's eyes widened in surprise and staggered back, a small cut forming on his chest. Naruto growled softly, The Kusanagi that Orochimaru used was considerably more powerful than the one that Sasuke had owned, possessing a variety of dangerous abilities. One of those abilities was the power to cut through almost anything. The steel of a human forged or a weaker magical sword would be naught but butter to the Kusanagi. Kiba summoned 2 more swords and hunched over, preparing for another reckless charge at the man, who stood there smirking amusedly while the sounds of battle raged across the church. While Kaneko was holding her own admirably, the exorcists had the advantage of numbers, and as such, they were slowly pushing her back into a corner. Kiba, go join Kaneko and take care of the fodder. You can't fight this guy at your level, Naruto ordered in a steely tone, leaving no room for argument. Kiba shot him a look of disbelief. What? But Naruto cut him off with a growl and pointed to where Kaneko was seemingly barely holding on, wounds covering her arms and littering her torso. Kiba shot another baleful glare towards the priest and looked back at Kaneko. Growling, he charged into the mob of priests and started scything his way towards his fellow peerage member. Naruto turned back to the crazed exorcist, who smiled cheerfully at him in response. "I'll ask you again. What's your name?" he stated, crossing his arms. He had to make sure not to get cut by the blade. In this state, his skin was surely not strong enough to withstand a direct blow from the blade. "My name? It's Fried Selzen. Take it with you to hell, you devil lover." Fried laughed as he charged Naruto. The mon's speed was surprising, yes, but nothing compared to the agility and cunning that the previous owner of the blade fought with. Naruto ducked under a swing of the razor-sharp blade and drew a kunai from a seal on his body. Fried giggled as he swiped wildly at the slippery blonde. "Stand still now. You should be glad that you're able to die at my hands, sinner." Fried feinted a stab then jabbed at Naruto's midsection, the blonde dodging to the left and slamming his fist into the exorcist, sending him flying into a row of seats, sending up a cloud of dust. It seems that he's not able to extend the blade as Orochimaru was once able to do. He flicked the kunai at Fried, who rolled out of the way in the nick of time, leaving the knife embed the ground. It also seems that he doesn't know about the fact that the Kusanagi can cut through almost anything. He must have obtained it recently then, to not know anything about the blade itself. He mused to himself. He glanced around him quickly. Kaneko and Kiba had just about finished with the other exorcists. Issei's faint energy signature was already moving quickly down to the basement of the church. He nodded, satisfied. Turning back to Fried, who was panting and glaring at him venomously, he held out a hand. A rotating blue ball of chakra formed in his outstretched hand and he grinned widely at the rogue, who shrunk back slightly, a wary look covering his face. It seemed that even someone as insignificant as he could sense the power contained within his Rasengan. Before Fried could react, Naruto shot forward in a blur of motion and slammed the Rasengan into the mon's chest. The man coughed out blood and was propelled through the wall of the church building, disappearing into the woods behind the church. Naruto squinted after Fried's body, making sure the man wasn't getting back up. When he was satisfied that the man had died, or at least been knocked unconscious, he turned to Kiba and Kaneko, who were both staring at him with wide eyes. A cry was heard from the corridor that led into the basement. Naruto looked back at where Fried had been sent flying, before shaking his head and turning back to the door that led to the basement of the church. He would deal with the Kusanagi issue later. Right now, Issei needed his help. A humanoid white blob giggled from its perch atop one of the trees in the forest that wrapped around the back of the old church. Vines writhed their way into the wall that Fried had been tossed out of and came back with the blade of Kusanagi held tightly in their grasp. The humanoid figure looked down to where Fried lay. Near the brink of death, the boy had not gotten any weaker. By the looks of the damage that had been done to the madman, tree roots sprouted from the ground and wrapped around Fried's damaged body and brought it into the safe embrace of the earth. Zetsu giggled as he sank into the tree, the legendary blade following him as well. The blade seemed to be more relaxed now that it was out of the hands of the crazed man. It seemed that he would need to find a more suitable wielder for the weapon, as well as the other weapons that he had. After all, no one had told him that he couldn't have fun while his counterpart was doing his job with that old devil. This would be enjoyable. Naruto broke through the doors of the church basement. Kiba and Kaneko right on his heels. What they saw made Naruto's eyes open wide in incredulity. A strong draconic aura was emitting from Issei's gauntlet, which was glowing a bright green light. The gauntlet had changed from when Naruto had last seen it. Instead of looking like the common twice critical, it now held the full appearance of the boosted gear. The blonde nun's body lay on an altar behind Rainer, who was backing up warily from Issei, shock visible in her violet eyes. It seemed that Issei had awoken the boosted gear earlier than he had expected. Coming from the boy's current state, tears streamed down the boy's face. Issei let loose a howl of rage and leapt forward, slamming his fist into Rainer. The fallen angel howled as she tumbled backward into the wall with a loud thud and slumped down, unmoving. Naruto winced at the sound that Reinare's body had made against the stone wall of the church. Issei panted as he stumbled over to Asia's body. The brown-haired boy fumbled around for any sign that the girl was still alive. That she was among the living, Naruto looked at Issei in slight sympathy. While he was no stranger to death, he knew that the ones that were closest to you would always be harder to accept than strangers. If sacred gears didn't kill their bearer after they were extracted, maybe he could have tried to save Asia. Alas, his abilities lay not into the realm of resurrection, but in the art of healing. Sensing a new presence enter the church, a smile grew on his face. Kaneko and Kiba seemed to notice it as well, turning to face the basement door. Rias and Akeno strode into the gloomy basement, faces set in grim masks as they took in the scene. Issei, who had since given up on the girl, turned to Rias with pleading eyes. "Bucko. Please, you can revive the dead with your evil pieces, right? Can you revive her?" he pleaded. Bowing his head, Rias hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering over to Asia's body and the slumped-over body of Reiner in the corner. She knew that the sacred gear had already been extracted from the girl. Naruto raised an eyebrow. It seemed that Rias was more selfish than originally shown. However, that was to be expected from a devil, a creature that essentially was the embodiment of sin. Naruto sighed and walked over to Reinare's motionless body. Aware of the eyes focused on his back, he knelt down, placing his right hand right above Reinare's sizable bust, and concentrated. Closing his eyes, he searched for the sacred gear within her. Once he found it, he slowly pried it out of her core, and he felt something drop into his palm. Opening his eyes, he was satisfied to find the sacred gear safely placed in the palm of his hand. Twilight Healing, one of the rarer healing sacred gears. This would suit Rias' peerage well. He walked over to Asia and placed his hand in the same position. Issei grasped at his hand. "What are you doing?" the boy demanded harshly. Naruto shook Issei's hand off. "Quiet. Do you want to save her or not?" Issei immediately clammed up, his muscles relaxing. Naruto turned his attention back to the girl's motionless body, uncaring of the fact that everyone else was staring at him in open disbelief. The sacred gear disappeared from his hand in a flash of green light, reunited with its former owner. Naruto brushed himself off and gave Rias a slight nod. The red head gave an unnoticeable sigh of relief and inclined her head as well. She took out an evil piece, a bishop if he wasn't misunderstood, and placed it on Asia's cold chest. Issei's face lit up in gratitude as he realized that Rias was going to revive the nun. "I, Rias Gremory, bid thee, Asia Argento, to rise. Walk the earth again as a devil, and my bishop. Relinquish the gates of heaven and hail to the gates of the underworld." The bishop piece shone a faint red color and sank into Asia's pale skin. For a moment, all was silent as they watched to see if it had worked. After what seemed like millennia of waiting, the nun's hand finally twitched, followed by the rest of her body. Issei let out a cry of joy as the blonde-haired girl sat up slowly and rubbed her head in confusion. "Anyway, I'll leave you to explain to her what happened. I have something I need to check upon, unless you need my help." Naruto spoke up, turning to exit the basement. Rias shook her head. "Well, be fine, Naruto. Thank you for the offer." The blonde nodded promptly and turned to go, before stopping. "By the way, what happened to the other fallen angels?" Rias rubbed her head, looking sheepish. "They were guarding the exterior of the church, so Akeno and I killed them." Naruto sighed. It seemed that Azazel would only be getting one of his followers back alive. "Do me a favor and let that crow live. I'll handle her after this." Rias shot him a confused glance, but nodded nonetheless, choosing to trust him. Issei opened his mouth to protest, but one glare of Rias shut him up right away. Rias sighed, turning back to the confused nun that sat in front of her. As he entered the main room of the church, Naruto located the hole that Freed had made in the wall, hopping through it and following the trail of destroyed foliage to where Freed's body should reside. Pushing past a low-hanging tree branch, he found a bloody stain on the ground, but nothing else, no sign of the Kusanagi either. He closed his eyes and breathed in slowly, trying to locate the energy signature of the Kusanagi. It was gone, as was Freed's body. He conducted a thorough search of the surrounding area, searching for any sign that Freed had dragged himself off with the legendary blade. No blood trails lay on the ground. It was like the madman had vanished into thin air. He slammed a fist into a nearby tree, sending wood splinters flying everywhere. Freed was most likely alive, armed with an extremely deadly weapon. Someone must have aided him in his escape. With the state he was in, there was no way he could move properly, much less escape the area before Naruto got to him. Taking a few breaths to calm himself down, he turned back to the direction of which he had come. He had other things to do. He would send a few of his clones around the town later tonight to look for the madman. Right now, he needed to return Rainier to Azazel before Issei did anything rash to the fallen angel. Naruto knocked on the slightly grimy door of the house that Azazel resided in. It was nothing too grand, but it fit Azazel's lax-ideal personality. Judging from the state of the house, it hadn't been cleaned very often. Naruto snorted in amusement as someone could be heard inside hurrying over to the door, but then slipping on something and falling to the ground with a large thud. Rainier gave him a confused look, crossing her arms under her bust. "Who lives here?" she demanded crossly. "You'll see," was his calm reply as he turned to the door, waiting for Azazel to open it. The door swung open to reveal the scruffy black and golden-haired man blinking owlishly at them. He was wearing pajamas, not surprisingly considering the time of their visit. Rainier's mouth dropped wide open. "El Lord Azazel," she stuttered, dropping to a knee in front of her leader. Azazel stared down at the prostrating fallen and back at Naruto. Azazel groaned and ran a hand through his messy hair. "Rainier, you know how much I hate when people call me that. I raised you after all, and Naruto, I didn't expect you at this time of the night." Naruto only smirked in reply. Rainier quickly stood up and bowed her head, her cheeks flushing slightly red. "I completed my end of the deal." Azazel blinked once more, then poked his head outside of his door, as if looking for something. "I thought there were others?" he questioned, scratching his head. Naruto laughed awkwardly. "Well, they kind of got into an altercation with Rias and her queen, and," he trailed off. "I suppose one is better than none then," Azazel mumbled, before opening the door wider and stepping aside to let the duo in. Rainier stepped tentatively into the house, but Naruto stayed put where he was. Azazel shot him a questioning look. "You're not coming in?" Naruto shook his head and yawned. "Nah. I think I'll head back to my place and get some sleep. Late night." Azazel stifled his own yawn and nodded in thanks to the blonde, who responded likewise. Naruto stepped off the porch of Azazel's porch and into the night. "Aagh!" Naruto screamed as he opened his front door only to find Ophis waiting for him on the other side of the door. The infinite dragon god had mostly just arrived there. Judging from the lingering traces of magic surrounding her, what the hell was Ophis doing in his house? The diminutive girl stood in front of the entrance to his house, staring up at him with expressionless eyes. He pinched the bridge of his nose. It looked like he wouldn't be getting much sleep tonight. "What are you doing here, Ophis? I thought that I told you to not come into my house unannounced." Naruto asked quizzically. The dragon god simply tilted her head. "I come to ask again. Will you join me in removing the Great Red from my home?" Naruto groaned. He should have expected that this would happen. Ophis was stubborn in every sense of the word, persistent to an end. It was obvious that she would have come back in a short period of time to ask him again. "Again, no, I will not join you." Ophis' shoulders slumped the smallest fraction, and Naruto felt a small amount of guilt race through his veins. "Very well. I will be back sometime later to ask you again then." She raised her head, turning to teleport away. Naruto reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling her muscles tense. "But," he continued, "I offer you an alternative solution to the issue." Ophis turned, her eyebrows raised in slight interest. It was one of the few moments that she showed anything akin to interest. Or emotion for that matter. "You stay with me here for a month, and if you enjoy your stay here, you will give up your fruitless crusade against Great Red." Ophis opened her mouth to protest, and Naruto raised a hand, silencing her. "However, if you do not end up enjoying your stay in the human world, I will talk to Great Red to see if we can work something out. The gap is a massive place. I am sure he can find a little pocket to stay in, far away from you. Is that fair?" Naruto held out a calloused hand. Ophis stared at the outstretched limb. Naruto held his breath, hoping that she would accept it. Slowly, she brought her hand up as well and shook it. The two held their hands in that position for a moment longer, allowing Ophis to convey her thoughts. "Very well. I accept your terms. You have never led me astray before, Naruto. I will trust you to keep your word." Ophis let go of his hand and dropped her delicate hand back to her side. Naruto shut the door behind him and stepped into the dark household, flicking on the lights. "Come. I'll make you some tea." Naruto took off his shoes and strode off towards the kitchen. Ophis nodded slightly and followed him into the kitchen and sat down at the table. Once they had settled down with their own cups of warm beverage, they sat at the table in relative silence, each taking slight sips of their drink in silence. Ophis poked a small bottle of honey that Naruto placed on the table. Seeing that he no objections to her touching the container, she popped the little cap off and poured some of the sticky liquid onto her hand, licking it with curious eyes. Naruto stifled a laugh as her usually emotionless eyes lit up in slight surprise at the sweetness of the liquid. "Here, Ophis. You're not supposed to eat honey like that. You have to put it in your tea." Here, I'll help you. Naruto placed a hand over Office's smaller hand. Office stiffened up, obviously not used to bodily contact. Wrapping her hand around the bottle, he helped her pour a small amount of the honey into the tea. Take a sip now. Tell me what you think. Office sniffed the tea tentatively, then picked up the china cup and took a large gulp of the warm liquid. It's good, thank you. Naruto chuckled warmly. You do know, if you end up gaining my aid against Great Red, you should be aware that my power, no matter how grand it is, cannot match up to the near unlimited power of the Dragon of the Apocalypse. Ophis tapped her fingers gently on the wooden table. No matter the issue of your power, the biblical god was able to seal away the Trihexa away with his power and survived to tell the tale. You are his equal, perhaps even his superior. Your power will be sufficient to reason with Great Red without any foreseeable issues. Ophis possessed on sign of concern as she picked up her cup of tea and eyed it, before taking another gulp of the drink. He leaned back in his chair, sighing. Ophis glanced over with a questioning look, and he chuckled slightly. To be honest, I am glad that you accepted my compromise. It's a hassle, having to keep an eye out for you with my shadow clones. It's much easier now. You were really the only one that was hard to keep an eye on. The apocalypse is sealed away. The dream is fairly easy to find. But you, the infinite, you were mobile. You caused me a lot of stress over these few centuries. Ophis stared down at her cup. I still do not understand why is it that you have insisted on keeping an eye on us. We are the most powerful beings in the world. Surely no harm could come to us. Ophis inquired, a quizzical look in her eyes. Naruto sighed inwardly. Sometimes, he forgot to look past Ophis' cold exterior and into the naive being that lay behind all that power. It's a story for another time. Naruto finally got out. He waved his hand, trying to change the subject. Seeing that Naruto was uncomfortable with the subject, she decided to drop it. Anyway, are you hungry? Ophis' stomach rumbled loudly. The girl's cheeks flushed a light red, and her hands clamped down on her stomach, as if she was blonde. Chuckled and rolled up his sleeves. It looks like he had a hungry tenant to cook for. After seeing Ophis eat, hungry was probably not the best term to describe what was happening in front of his eyes. The platters of food that he had made were being vacuumed into what could only be described as an endless void. The petite girl happily dug into a plate of salmon with gusto, her monotone expression still stuck on her face. Naruto would have laughed at the sight if Ophis wasn't consuming his groceries for next week. Instead, he resigned himself to helping himself to some of the food as well, silently sighing as his food was sucked into the bottomless pit that was the girl's stomach. He hoped that she wouldn't be this hungry every day. He didn't fancy the idea of having to make daily trips down to the local grocery store. Surely this would be a one-time thing? As he watched the dark-haired girl demolish the remainder of the food that he had prepared, his mind wandered back to the short conversation that the two had shared a few nights prior. What was it that she called him again? Ah yes, she had said that he was brave. He still disagreed with her statement. If he was brave, he would have battled alongside the biblical god against the Trihexa when it rampaged across the land. Maybe the god wouldn't have died then. Ophis looked up at the blonde quizzically, wiping a stray piece of rice off her lip with the back of her hand. What are you thinking about? She asked. Setting down her pair of chopsticks, Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, feigning ignorance. Oh, nothing, just thinking about the past, nothing too serious. That doesn't sound like nothing. What are you thinking about, Naruto? Nothing you need to worry about. Ophis' eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Oh, by the way, you'll be needing new clothes, unless you can form them out of nowhere. I'll take you down into the town tomorrow to get you some. Naruto pointed at Ophis' outfit with his pair of chopsticks. Ophis looked confused, glancing down at her meager clothing. I do not understand. What is wrong with my clothing? The girl asked, tilting her head sideways. Everything. Your clothes are too revealing. Ophis studied her attire more carefully, turning back to Naruto. She shook her head. I still do not see the problem. Naruto sighed in exasperation. Let's just say that if you want to stay with me here, you'll need new clothes. Besides, it'll be a good bonding opportunity between you and I. Ophis seemed to take this for an acceptable answer. Nodding slowly, Naruto leaned back and studied the dining table. Empty plates were scattered across the wooden table, accompanied by little scraps of food here and there. He sighed mentally. He would have to teach Ophis how to eat slower and cleaner. He turned to Ophis, who sat there staring at him with her emotionless eyes. He smiled at her. Why don't you get yourself acquainted with the house, Ophis? I'll clean this up. He gestured to the messy table. Then I'll join you and show you where you'll be sleeping. The petite girl nodded and hopped off her chair, wandering into the hallway that led into the rest of the house. Ophis wandered aimlessly around the dimly lit house, absent-mindedly noting the lack of decorations that the house possessed. Knowing the personality of the owner that resided in the building, It was quite odd that there weren't any flashy embellishments lining the halls of the house. It was like Naruto hadn't modified the interior of the house since he had walked in. She eventually reached Naruto's bedroom, something that she hadn't been able to get a good look at when she had visited him before. The room wasn't unlike the rest of the house, scarcely decorated, besides what seemed to be a framed photo that stood on his bedside drawer. Walking over to the photo, she bent down for a better look, tilting her head in curiosity, letting her black tresses of hair fall across her face. It was a picture of what looked to be a younger Naruto, along with 3 other people that she didn't quite recognize. They seemed to be rather close with Naruto, considering how comfortable they looked with him, and vice versa. She wondered what happened to these others, the masked man, the dark-haired boy, and the girl with the color of sakura petals. Had they died? It seemed like a likely outcome, knowing Naruto's age. She set the photo down, glancing back at the doorway. The lights in the kitchen were still on, and the clattering sound of dishes along with the rushing sound of water still echoed from the illuminated room. She wondered if there was anything else of interest that Naruto kept in his room, perhaps in the drawer? Placing a pale hand on the handle of the drawer, she pulled on it. It didn't budge. She tried again, putting a little bit of strength into her action. She didn't want to break it now, did she? Something told her that Naruto wouldn't be very happy if she did. The drawer still didn't budge. She growled in slight frustration. No matter how hard she pulled on the handle, the drawer wouldn't move. Ophis was so immersed into getting the drawer open that she didn't notice the sound of footsteps behind her. She stiffened as someone placed their larger hand over her smaller one. Looking back, she found Naruto looking not at her, but at the picture on the drawer wistfully. Who were they? She found herself asking, strangely curious as to the identity of the people in the picture. Naruto chuckled, a hint of sadness tinging his voice. They were my family, he mumbled. Ophis was confused. Family? She echoed. I don't understand. Let's just say that they were people that were close to me, people that I loved. Naruto smiled at her. Ophis still didn't understand, but she nodded her head as if she did. Judging from the look that Naruto was emitting, it was a sensitive topic for him, and probably something that he didn't want to talk about. She may not have understood much about emotions, but if there was one thing that she had learned over her sparse trips to the outside world from the Gap, it was how to read people. What's in this drawer? Ophis inquired, drawing Naruto's attention. His eyes widened when he saw what she was talking about. Oh, I just keep some old souvenirs there, nothing too important. He rubbed his head and chuckled awkwardly. Can I see? Ophis asked innocently. Naruto nodded, leaning forward and pressed his palm on the drawer handle. After a few seconds, the handle clicked and Naruto pulled out the drawer to reveal its contents. A worn journal. The journal's brown cover was dusted in ash, and it looked like it had been through hell and back. The pages were all discolored and worn away. Is that yours? Ophis questioned, to which Naruto nodded once more. Yeah. Something to remember my past by, he stated somberly, fingering the worn cover of the journal gingerly as if one wrong touch could make the book fall apart, which, Ophis guessed, was completely plausible. The journal looked ancient and as such, was probably very delicate. Can I see what's written in it? The girl held out a hand questioningly. Naruto chuckled sadly. Who says that there's anything written in here? He flipped the delicate book open to the first page and lay it down gently on the nightstand. Ophis peered over and saw what seemed to be a photo collection, all of which were featuring Naruto. The first photo in the collection was a photo of the younger Naruto, posing in a picture with a massive grin on his face, an old man wearing robes and a strange hat standing beside him, a warm hand placed on Naruto's shoulder. In the background, a man and a younger woman also waved at Ophis, warm smiles on their faces, both carrying what seemed to be a bowl of noodles. Intrigued, Ophis turned to Naruto for an explanation. That was me when I was really young, as I am sure you can tell, Naruto started, pointing at the smiling boy clad in an orange jumpsuit. That's Sarutobi Oji-san. He was the 3rd Hokage of the village I was part of. He paused. What does Hokage mean? Ophis inquired curiously. It roughly translates to fire shadow. A Hokage is essentially the leader of the village that I used to be part of, the strongest shinobi in the village. Ophis could almost detect a hint of reverence in Naruto's tone. Were you a Hokage? Ophis asked. Naruto jolted back as if he was struck, eyes wide. What makes you ask that, Ophis? You said that the Hokage was the strongest shinobi in the village. Surely your power was enough to become Hokage as well, Ophis stated blandly. Naruto chuckled sheepishly, rubbing his head. Well, you see, I wasn't very strong back then, not as strong as I am now. I was probably one of the weakest in my village when I was younger. As for your question, I never was Hokage, though I wish I had the chance to do so. Naruto stared the ceiling wistfully. Ophis nodded thoughtfully. If she had to stay with Naruto for a month, she would need to learn more about him. And those two in the background? Office asked curiously, pointing at the respective profiles. Naruto's eyes widened as if he had just seen them. Those two were some of my favorite people in the village, Tuchi and Ayame, his daughter. They gave me food when I needed it the most. I'll always be thankful to them for that. Naruto smiled again wistfully. Office reached to turn the page, but Naruto was faster than her. In a blur, he closed the journal, placing it back into the drawer and pushing it back into the nightstand. Sorry about that, Office, but I think I'll save these for another day. How about I show you where you'll be sleeping for your stay? Naruto clapped his hands together and stood up. Office nodded reluctantly and allowed herself to follow the blonde out of his room. Before she left, she cast one last look at the locked drawer, the one that contained his memories of the past. Sometimes, the past is just as it is coined, the past. Sometimes, the past needs to be left behind and forgotten. Naruto Uzumaki was truly enigma wrapped in a veil. Office wanted to know more. Thanks for watching.